Hey everyone, this is James and Louisa, and we are doing our fruits and vegetables labs on carrots specifically and how pigmentation and other factors are affected through cooking. So, to introduce, there are different degrees of heat and processing that can influence carotenoid stability, texture, flavor, color, as well as differences that occur in costs and nutrient content between different variations of these vegetables, including fresh, frozen, canned, and dried varieties of carrots specifically. So, our main goal was to explore how different processing methods can alter these factors: texture, color, nutrition content, and to understand the effects that heat has on certain essential nutrients like vitamin A, beta carotene, vitamin C, among others.
So for our materials and methods, the experiment involved cooking carrots using different conditions, like James mentioned, fresh, frozen, canned, and dried. And for all of the conditions, half a cup of water was boiled, and then the produce was simmered until it was tender. Um, so for the frozen, the canned, and the dried carrots, the same procedure was made, and the instructor said to evaluate the appearance, the textures, the flavor, which we couldn't do obviously, and the pH of the cooking liquid, which was data that we collected, that was already collected for us.
So after,
So,
oh, I got this one. After
oh,
the
okay.
after we looked through all of this data, it was actually kind of surprising the amount of analysis that we did with such a small amount of with such a basic procedure. So the first set of data we looked at was descriptive data that was in the form of subjective descriptions like the words mushy or tender. So we took that subjective data and we converted it to an objective 1 through 4 scale. So for that specific piece of data, these two tables here were created to represent carrot texture on the left and carrot flavor on the right. So for the texture, only fresh was assessed from the uncooked state for texture and flavor. But we could see here that fresh had a very crisp texture, but then once cooked, both fresh and frozen had a texture that was described as tender, whereas the canned had a texture that was described as mushy. And I think when you get to that area, you're dealing with an unfavorable characteristic. Dried was described as chewy, which I felt was kind of on a different scale because it was cooking from a different state. It was a dehydrated state. It was not a state that was similar to which the other ones were. So it was on a scale that I felt was different from the crisp to mushy scale. And then in terms of flavor, the fresh was again the only one that was tested, and it had a flavor that was described as fresh. But then with the cooked state, the frozen one actually had the best flavor, as we could see from this table. Frozen had um, a flavor that was described as fresh, which was a 4, and then if the actual fresh carrot was a 3, canned was 2, and dried was 1, which was described as bland. And we could see from the bar graphs at the bottom that the way that these texture flavor comparisons actually compared with each other. So for the rest of the data, we included it on the discussion slides that talk about those respective characteristics, which we will talk about now.
Okay, so for the effect of heat in carotenoids, um, first, at low heat, carotenoids remain stable and bioavailability improves slightly. At moderate heat, it enhances the bioavailability further, but it actually reduces the content of the carotenoids a little bit. And for the high heat, it actually causes degradation, leading to faded color, reduced nutritional value, and these are effects that are evident in the appearance and the nutrient analysis of the carrot with the different preparations. this is due to the stability that they have across different heat levels. Um, okay, then thank you. And
Mhm.
then for the comparison of the fresh, the frozen, canned, and the dried carrots, the different processing conditions significantly affected the characteristics of the cooked carrots. First, for the fresh, the color were a bright orange. They had a firm texture, a sweet flavor, and they were high in nutritional value. For the frozen carrots, they retained most of their nutrients with a vibrant color due to the blanching that frozen carrots require, but the texture is softened a little bit. For the canned carrots, they were duller in color, they had a mushy texture and lower vitamin C content due to the high heat processing. And then for the dried carrots, they had intensely concentrated flavors and nutrients like potassium, but they were darker in color and they had a tougher texture. I'm sorry, yeah, tougher and chewier texture that they actually do not fully return to the actual tenderness of the carrots because of the previous process of drying.
So we also assessed the pH of the cooking liquid, and each of these different processing methods, each of the carrots that were cooked into these processing methods, they all underwent this same boiling process. So there was a residual water cooking liquid that was left over. And it was observed that the highest pH was in the cooking liquid of the frozen carrots. And the reason for this, again, was the blanching prior to freezing. When the carrots are blanched, they're cooked very quickly in boiling water, and then they're removed from that boiling water. During that short period of time, acids are released from those carrots, but then the water that contains the acid is removed. So that is resulting in the highest pH. As we know, acids are a low pH. So if you're removing the low pH liquid from the carrots and storing them elsewhere, the acids that were previously in those carrots have been removed, which resulted in a product with less with a higher pH. So then when you're boiling it, there's less acid to go into that water. The lowest pH was observed in the cooking liquid of the cooked carrots. When I'm sorry, canned. That should say canned. The canned carrots. When carrots or vegetables in general are canned, they are cooked beforehand and then they are stored in the cooking liquid pre-canning. Um, so all of the acids that were extracted from the carrots during that pre-canning cooking process stay with the product in the canning, and then when they are cooked, they're cooked with the carrot, but then also some of that pre-canning cooking liquid, which resulted in the highest amount of acids. The fresh and the dried did not undergo a prior liquid-based cooking, so therefore they did not lose acid from that pre-packaging type cooking. The dried may have lost a little bit during the dehydration process while the water is being pulled out of it. That evaporation process is going to be pulling water out, and some of the acids will go with it. Hence, the dried having a slightly higher pH than the fresh, but those two are very similar because they did not undergo a water-based cooking prior.
Okay, so for the nutrient content, um, the fresh carrots, the uncooked fresh carrots, show a high content of vitamin A, beta carotene, and moderate amounts of vitamin C, potassium, and copper. But they were also low in folate and high in fiber. For the frozen and cooked carrots, they were high in vitamin A and beta carotene. For the canned uncooked carrots, they were a great source of vitamin A and beta carotene and provided moderate amounts of fiber, potassium, vitamin K. And again, they were low in folate and vitamin C. And for the dried uncooked carrots, they were high in vitamin A and beta carotene, higher in potassium, in fiber, and vitamin K. And they were actually high in natural sugars. This is due to the drying process that it previously had, and it actually concentrated the sugars. For the cooked versions, the fresh carrots, the cooking actually makes certain nutrients, including vitamin A, more bioavailable, and beta carotenes too. But since vitamin C and different water-soluble vitamins are actually sensitive to heat, they might be lost during the cooking process. So cooking actually reduces the content of vitamin A and also other nutrients like potassium, copper, and folate. For the frozen cooked carrots, the vitamin A was preserved after cooking as well as a beta carotene. And actually, for the canned and the dried carrots, we did not have that info available on Happy Forks. So summarizing, the nutritional analysis showed that fresh carrots retain the most nutrients before cooking. Well, for obvious reasons, they had no processing at all. And the cooking reduced the vitamin C and the folate in all conditions. Like I said, vitamin A, I'm sorry, and beta carotene remained stable.
So then in terms of cost, the fresh carrots are the least expensive per 100 grams. They underwent the least amount of processing and they had their original mass. So there wasn't a loss of mass that would affect the conversion to 100-gram units. And it just makes sense that a food product with the least amount of processing is going to be the cheapest. If you look at the fresh, the frozen, and the canned, they're all relatively cheap. The fresh is significantly cheaper. The frozen and the canned were in that 20-ish cents per 100-gram range. The dried carrots are by far the most expensive. One, they undergo the most processing. It requires the most resources to undergo that whole process. Dried foods in general are just so much more expensive, whether it's meats, fruits, vegetables. And one of the major reasons for that, if we're looking at a per 100-gram unit, dehydration is going to remove a lot of the water, which is going to result in less mass. So, in order to get that product back up to a 100-gram unit, we're going to have to be increasing the amount of that product that we're actually going to be using. The entire product itself was less than 100 grams, whereas the fresh, frozen, and canned, it was all significantly over 100 grams. So in order to get that $7.02 price, we actually had to take a full entire package and then add more to it just to get to that amount. Like Luisa said multiple times, where with the drying process, you are concentrating these nutrients because you're removing so much of the water. So per 100 grams, that cost is significantly higher compared to fresh, frozen, and canned.
And for the pros and the cons, actually each method offers different advantages and both disadvantages. So the fresh carrots are actually ideal for raw consumption or light cooking, since they retain most of the nutrients, but actually have a shorter shelf life. The frozen carrots are convenient and are nutrient dense, but the texture softens a little bit after cooking, so that might not be desirable. The canned carrots are great for soft dishes, but they actually lose vibrancy and some of the nutrients. And the dried carrots, they have the longest shelf life and the most concentrated nutrients, but they need rehydration after for a softer texture. And when you dehydrate them, the final texture might not be the best since it can be a little bit tougher and chewy, like I mentioned before. And this actually might not be desirable for everyone.
So just a couple of limitations for this lab. There were no pictures of the uncooked state of the carrot varieties. So we weren't really able to assess change in color. We were able to see what they looked like, and we could all imagine what they looked like in the cooked state, and we could all imagine what uncooked carrots would look like. But we didn't actually get to see what these exact carrots got to look like. So that exact comparison wasn't possible. And then using any online nutrient analysis platform, in this case, happyforks.com, it depends on the consistency of the sources that they're using. So we noticed that some of the versions came directly from the USDA website, but not all of them. So the consistency with which they're gathering this information is going to determine how reliable that comparison really is. So if they're not getting them from the same source, then our comparisons might not be as reliable as possible. So to conclude, our experiment highlights how different cooking methods affect the color, texture, and nutrient content of carrots. Based on the data that we had, fresh carrots provided the best nutritional value, while frozen, canned, and dried offer convenience, though they may lose some nutrients in the process. But like I said, the limitations of where we are gathering this nutrient content from could be considered here. So it may not always be that fresh carrots are the most nutritional, but based on the data that we had, that is what we determined. Thank you very much.
Thank you.